Hello and welcome to the 24th Annual Get Lit Festival. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit Programs, a nonprofit organization housed within Eastern Washington University. Our program is responsible for Get Lit, Washington State's longest-running annual literary festival, which hosts readings, writing workshops, craft classes, panel discussions, and much more. This year, we're excited to be hosting in-person events taking place this Thursday through Sunday, April 21st through 24th, in many venues across downtown Spokane. And of course, we're very happy to be back with you in this virtual space as well. You can find a full schedule of in-person and virtual events, along with information about all of our festival authors by visiting our website, getlitfestival.org. Now I'd like to welcome Luke Lineberger, Get Lit's Assistant Coordinator, who will introduce today's event.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you all for being here today. Today, I would like to welcome you to Poetry and Prose, a reading and conversation with Sayantani Dasgupta and Rajiv Mohabir. Sayantani's short story collection, Women Who Misbehave, and Rajiv's poetic memoir, Antiman, both use their own experiences and the experiences of their characters to approach questions of cultural heritage, sexuality, and identity. Today, both writers will read and engage in a short conversation about their poetry and prose, which they use to redefine roles and boundaries typically put around immigrants, women, and other underrepresented groups. Before we get started, we would like to introduce you to both writers. Rajiv Mohabir's memoir, Antiman, received the 2019 Restless Books New Immigrant Writing Prize. He is also the author of 3 books of poetry, Cutlish, The Cowherd's Son, which was the winner of the 2015 Kundiman Prize, and The Taxidermist's Cut, winner of the 4-Way Books Intro to Poetry Prize, and finalist for the 2017 Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. Rajiv is also the translator of I Even Regret Night, Holy Songs of Demerara, which received a Penheim Translation Fund Grant Award and the 2020 Harold Morton Landon Translation Award from the Academy of American Poets. Currently, he is an assistant professor of poetry in the MFA program at Emerson College and translations editor at Waxwing Journal.
Born in Calcutta and raised in New Delhi, Sayantani Dasgupta is an assistant professor of creative writing at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She is the author of Women Who Misbehave, Fire Girl, Essays on India, America, and the In-Between, and the chapbook The House of Nails, Memories of a New Delhi Childhood. Sayantani's research includes creative nonfiction, literary fiction, South Asian history and literature, Indian cinema, world religions, fairy tales, folklore, and mythology. She is currently at work on a memoir. Sayantani, we would love to get today's reading started with you, so please welcome Sayantani Dasgupta.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Luke. Rajiv, what a thrill to be here in this virtual space with you. So I'm just going to get started. I'm going to read this story called Miss Josephine from Women Who Misbehave. And Miss Josephine may or may not have been inspired by the witch character from Hansel and Gretel. So I'm just going to, that's all I'm going to say in terms of introducing Miss Josephine. When Miss Josephine died, we all cried like we had lost our mothers. But Miss Josephine looked nothing like our mothers. She was neither brown nor young. She did not wear cotton saris or nylon salwar kameezes. Miss Josephine was old and white, her face the texture of beaten leather, her hair a nest of gray. Her skin turned a vivid red in the sun, as if she had been held against her wishes and someone had struck angry wells on her body. That's why our mothers said, God never intended for Miss Josephine to be in India. But we, her fan club, vehemently disagreed, because without Miss Josephine, our childhood wouldn't have tasted very good. It would have been as unremarkable as that of kids in neighborhoods that didn't have an old white lady baker of their own. It was Miss Josephine's Black Forest cake that we ate on our birthdays, the leftovers of her pastries that we nibbled on when our mothers hosted kitty parties, and her rum cakes and fruit pies that marked our Christmases and New Year's. Without Miss Josephine, how would we have ever learned to appreciate an apple strudel or its flaky crust? Her foods nourished us as much as our mother's milk, but unlike our mothers, Miss Josephine rarely smiled and never once asked about our well-being. What she lacked in motherly love, she more than made up with her creations, rich, gooey, and saturated with sugar. No one quite knew when Miss Josephine had first moved into the corner house. She was already there when our mothers arrived, one after the other, as blushing brides, eager and excited to start this new chapter of their lives. Of course, the corner house wasn't really a house. It had been built to function as an annex, but the landlord had rented it out to make some extra money on the side. From the outside, it was unimpressive to say the least. It was blotchy and gray, the color of spit. It was box-shaped with plain brown windows on all four sides. Despite multiple attempts and our best efforts, we could never see through the windows. Miss Josephine kept them covered with heavy curtains, and if she ever washed and changed them, she surely did so in the middle of the night with the lights turned off. Whenever any of her customers found out where she lived, they always seemed shocked that the maker of such divine creations, an artist in her own right, could exist day after day in something so utterly devoid of color and character. No one ever saw the inside of her house because in all the years she lived on our street, Miss Josephine never invited anyone. When we asked our mothers why, they came up with a variety of explanations, some more creative than others. Perhaps Miss Josephine kept her secret recipes inside a locked cabinet that she didn't want to show the world. Perhaps she was embarrassed that brown people lived in bigger homes than hers. Perhaps she liked the peace and quiet for prayer and meditation purposes. Or maybe one of her family members was a notorious serial killer and she had his life-size poster on a wall. Their answers never satisfied us, and so Miss Josephine's house remained a mystery. The only evidence of her artistry lay in the neatly trimmed row of grass surrounding the annex. She kept it clean and perfect, as if in readiness of a military-grade inspection. One summer, we came up with an innovative plan to peek inside her home. As soon as Miss Josephine returned from the bakery, we decided to march over with a big bowl of turmeric paste that we told her was from our mothers, so that she could put it on her skin and soothe herself. We would knock loudly on her door and wait. She would open it a crack and poke her head out, her beady blue eyes watchful, as if for monsters, her sparse eyebrows pinched and her thick chin quivering slightly. We would breathe in the mixed smells coming from within, washing soap, cabbage, vanilla, but could never tell if she was genuinely scared or hamming it up for our benefit. Her frightened face only made us uncomfortable, and after a week of attempts, we gave up. Needless to say, not once did she thank us for the turmeric paste, nor did she invite us in. Miss Josephine dressed the same every day. She wore large, full-sleeved blouses in black or gray, and thick skirts that came down to her calves. She didn't own any jewelry, except for a slim silver dial watch with a black strap, which may have fit her once, but was now clamped on her left wrist like the jaws of a shark. Her sagging skin, speckled with red and brown freckles, stretched uncomfortably over her hands and face, as if they couldn't contain her weight anymore. Her ankles were as fat as trees, and we joked that she must have to sleep with her shoes on, the sturdy black leather ones so tight we were sure she could not pry them off, and yet their buckles shone as if she polished them every night. Our mothers scolded us whenever they caught us giggling over Miss Josephine. They told us to leave her alone, because clearly that's what the old lady wanted. Plus, she never troubled anyone. But often our mothers too succumbed to the same temptation, and we would hear them chuckling over how little Miss Josephine had changed since the time each of them had first arrived in the neighborhood. She must have been born old, was everyone's conclusion. Sometimes our mothers would worry about Miss Josephine too. She is getting on in her years, they would say. Wonder if she has any family anywhere. And then they would add, she really should be a little more forthright and tell us about herself. Who will run around if something happens? Hospital, doctors, medicines? Who will shoulder the responsibility? Of course we will help. We are good, decent people here. But still, family is family. Were our mothers genuinely concerned, or did they know how to make excuses in advance? In spite of God knows how many decades in this country, Miss Josephine only spoke English. She didn't sound English though. We knew what English was like. We had watched enough episodes of Yes, Prime Minister and Mind Your Language. But every time we asked her where she was from, Miss Josephine shooed us away. Dipti, taller and often smarter than the rest of us, and our self-proclaimed leader because she was 2 whole years older, insisted that Miss Josephine sounded like she could be from Austria. We had no choice but to take her word because thanks to her diplomat father, Dipti had spent 3 months in Austria and now considered herself the last word on all things European. The year Miss Josephine retired from the bakery, an American ice cream shop opened across the street. Miss Josephine continued to sell some of her specialties from home, provided we remembered to put in a request the night before. More often than not, we forgot, which was just as well. By then, we were almost 12, and desserts stopped mattering as much. Or they did, but we knew how to suppress our greed than to give in like gluttons. The ice cream shop offered a whole new world, filled with unusual flavors and exciting infinite possibilities. But the biggest temptation it offered was the high school boys from Don Bosco, who stopped there every evening after soccer practice. We watched them from the corners of our eyes. Sweaty from practice, they smelled of dirt, dust, grass, and something else. They took up the entire corner table, pulling in chairs noisily as if they owned the place. They looked at us appraisingly, and their gaze heated something underneath our skin. Sometimes they smiled at us, though to them we were probably nothing more than little girls. But we didn't feel like little girls. So we watched them, those toned arms, the sweat purling against their skin, the way they licked their mouths and wiped their chins. Miss Josephine died the year most of us turned 13. It was her landlord who discovered her. He had stopped by, puzzled that she was 2 days late in paying her rent. Apparently, that had never happened in the 29 years she had been his tenant. When he broke open the door, he found her in bed. The doctor declared that she had died in her sleep, heart failure, mostly painless. Like she had been throughout her life, in death too, Miss Josephine was quiet and unobtrusive. She didn't scream or shout or in any way inconvenience the people who lived around her. We were at school when it happened, probably planning yet another trip to the ice cream shop in the evening to tease both our taste buds and our eyes. We heard it in the afternoon when the school bus dropped us home and our mothers rushed to us with the news. By then, the landlord's servants had removed her body. With the doors and windows wide open, her house resembled a demolished cake. Its innards spilled out for everyone to witness its humiliation. When the landlord saw us approaching, he gave us a wan smile and said we were free to pick up anything we thought had sentimental value before he sent in the servants to clean. He warned us to not be disappointed, though. As far as he could tell, Miss Josephine owned nothing of value. His permission seemed so outrageous and unbelievable that for a few minutes we forgot Miss Josephine was dead. We ran all the way, pushing and shoving each other to be the first to enter this Aladdin's cave that had so far been denied to us. Our mothers followed right behind, walking as quickly as their dignity would allow. We came to an abrupt stop at the door, as if any moment now, Miss Josephine would emerge and shoo us away. But that didn't happen. When we remembered our reason for being there, fresh tears pricked our eyes. We entered a room lit resentfully by the last rays of a setting sun. It revealed a plain cement floor and patchy gray walls in need of repair. The outlines against the windows clearly showed where the thick, heavy curtains had once been. In spite of the open windows and sunshine, the house smelled faintly of cabbage and vanilla. Deepti's mother coughed loudly and clamped the end of her pallu to her nose, as if she would be the next one to drop dead if she wasn't too careful. Only her eyes were visible above her sari face mask, and she looked like an overgrown owl, round-eyed and watchful. The drawing room led directly into the kitchen and onto the bedroom and bathroom on the left. We trooped into the kitchen, which had an old but functional gas stove, nothing even remotely fancy. The shelves stacked to the walls contained an assortment of overused pots, baking pans, measuring cups and spoons. Someone reminded Deepthi of how she had once claimed that Miss Josephine had offered to teach her how to make the most perfect apple strudels. We laughed as Deepti's cheeks colored at the memory of her tall tale. After all, we didn't get too many opportunities to prove she wasn't that much better than us. Really, how could she have thought we would believe her fantastic story? A few books on baking were propped against the kitchen counter, and our mothers advanced towards them like a mob. We left them there and entered the bedroom, which was as sparse as the rest of the house. It too had a distinct smell, a combination of detergent and old clothes. The single bed had already been stripped bare of sheets and now held 2 worn pillows and a thin mattress, stained yellow with age. A modest-sized closet held Miss Josephine's entire array of 8 full-sleeved cotton dresses and skirts and 3 bulky sweaters in black, brown, and navy. At the sight of her familiar dresses, a few in our group started sobbing. We huddled around to comfort them and didn't notice when Deepthi moved past us towards the bookshelf beside Miss Josephine's bed. "What's this?" she cried. We ran to her, our gaze following the direction of her finger. All 5 shelves were filled with identical notebooks, the kinds we used in school, inexpensive and with ruled pages inside. Miss Josephine had numbered them all. There were 41 of them, the years jotted and taped to the spines. Greedily, Deepthi pulled down the diary marked I. A hush descended into the room as we crowded around her. She opened the first page. We read the date, 1st January 1948, and recognized the neat spindly letters. They were Miss Josephine's all right. We had seen her write down orders at the bakery and at home. We had read her many receipts. The pages in the book, however, contained 4 words repeated over and over. At least we assumed they were 4 words. We recognized the letters and sounded them out, but strung like that, they made no sense. Nothing was capitalized or punctuated, just a string of letters repeated again and again. ICH, WUSST, NICHT, HERSHEL. Deepthi turned the page. It was the same 4 words again. Unpronounceable, unfathomable. The notebook switched hands, but irrespective of who tried and how many times, the letters didn't make any sense. I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sayantani. So now we will have Rajiv Mohabir. Go ahead and take the stage.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kate and Luke, for organizing this and the Get Lit Fest literary festival also. And Sayantani, thank you for your reading and then asking me to also be on this panel with you. I'm so excited. And I loved hearing about Mrs. Josephine. I'm going to read 2 small sections from, excuse me, my memoir, Antiman, which kind of straddle prose and poetry. And the first one I'm going to read is Amazon River Dolphin. Oh, something that you should know. No, never mind. You should know what you know coming into this book. Amazon River Dolphin. You unfold your lungs and dive into the dark Queen's avenues filled with cat-calling men and oh hell no women. You walk into your aunt's house and she puts you out. You walk into your aunt's house and she tells everyone you know it's a brothel. You walk into your aunt's house and when your grandmother died, no one called you or invited you to the wake because of your condition, because of your being disturbed, because of your blubber. They watch your movie where you give birth to a watermelon and you lick every cetacean seed you have seen. After each man, you lick your fingers. The Amazon River dolphin dries their pink body on the riverbank before dancing at parties, attracted to the din of drums. They are a skilled musician, an expert of communication where human words deflate. Their words pulse throughout the Amazon basin. You can hear them when you lose yourself in the rainforest. If you look into their eyes, you will fall into a fever. They will impregnate you or cause you to impregnate them. Don't blame your own practice of mischief on others. From the shore, you are singing this song of praise. From the shore, you sing to the Lord who is half woman and half man. Your own body's earth in hemispheres, the Ganga, the Jamuna, the Pleiades in your throat. Open your Caribbean lips, spread them with one hand. Your ass is begging for it. Your song, it's not your fault that men, women, queers drown to hear it. In the Orinoco River, the dolphin is a singer. You practice singing in 6 languages since your pubes were seedlings. Your parents are from South America, so you can be what you will, half Indian, half mammal, half sea, wherever you locate your whole. Don't bother explaining Indian indenture. Your vertebrae are not fused, capillaries close to skin. A mollusk with 1 shell or 2 or more, or not a mollusk at all, but rather cetacean pink skin and echolocation. You are suited for locating queers. How can you be pink? There are river dolphins in the Ganga River. There are river dolphins in Guyanese rivers. Your echolocation vibes with both species. How queer for a dolphin to live in a river. Diaspora is a queer country. How can you be 2 species from 2 places? You break your mirror into 2. You hear that on the streets, queers are bashed over the heads. Queers are gunned down in the village. Queers are queers and queers. 1 down, yo-ho, yo-ho, you are a pirate, a poker. You are into men up to your balls. You are what your balls say you are. You wear eyeliner and fuck that. You are a nautical mile. And then the cutlass, the machete. And then you learn to bisect yourself and throw away the dolphin bones. You stop singing and visiting rivers. Your bones hang in the museum. Once upon a time, a man was a man. Once upon a time, a woman was part of a man. She was extracted and they lived separately. The Bible is the sword in the armor of God. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Follow me and I will cleave you in 2. Follow me and we will overfish streams. Follow me and we will starve the boto into extinction. On biologizing desires, on biologizing bodies, a truth that is justified in an epistemological bound that is a tide. Sometimes barnacles and bivalves die from the out tide. Sometimes being exposed hollows you. You now lapse into the realm of the mythological. You are a folktale warning sons and daughters, beware of pink bodies. It is drawn to 1-2, 1-2 drums. 2 is a myth. Climbing into the Orinoco River, you feel it first in your feet. Only pain. Your ankles fuse, then fluke. You enter the river and, below the silt, disappear. The next piece that I'm going to read to you is called Narishvaram Raga. And it's a raga that is in praise of Ardhanarishvara, who is the god that is half Shakti, half Shiva. So like half male, half female in the ways that people talk about it. And it's written in the raga Kumudha Kriya. And the tala is Rupakam. And I will butcher the Sanskrit, but I will read it aloud and my translation of it before we get into the rest of the meat of the poem. Ardhanarishvaram Aradhayami Santatam Atribrighu Vashishta Muni Brinda vanditam. Imaginary of line. I bow to the Lord who is half Shakti, half Shiva, whom the sages Atri, Bhrigu, and Vashisht exalt. Ardayama Alankara Vishesha Prabhavam, Ardhanarishvari Priyamkaram Abhay Karam Shivam. At midnight's half watch, their adornments are indomitable and ardent. Beloved of Ardhaneshwari, they, benevolent, bestow fearlessness. Nagendra Mani Bhushitam Nannadi Tugaraho Hitam Shri Guru Gaha Pujitam Kumada Kriya Raganutam Agamadi Sanatam Ananta Veda Ghoshitam Amre Shadi Savitam Arakat Varana Shobitam. Yes. Adorned by the serpent jewel mounted on the bull Nandi, worshipped by Subramanya, praised in Kumuda Kriya Ragam, extolled by the Agamas and the Vedas alike. Their servants are devas like Indra. They shimmer a reddish sheen. Your father pulls over as you drive along the Blue Ridge. It's a black river. Wildflowers fringe the bank. You are on your way to some uncle's daughter's nikah, migrating from Florida to Toronto. On the radio, a 1960s Bollywood tape spins at its tin and screeches. You step out and pick elderflowers and black-eyed Susans to tuck into your braids. Some things are unconscionable, your father says, like the liberties people take with their freedom. Why can't we be whatever we want? The lyrics of your music are non sequitur. Al bari nages one sense. Consider Ardhanarishvara, Papa. There is a god, goddess, split down the center, the right side Shiva, the left Parvati, whole. There's universe in my throat. Nonsense. Are you a god? You are not a mythological creature. Its Carabana in Toronto and Sunnyman's Lotela beats its chutney soka. You've heard this song at family parties. The queer you're eyeing asks your cousin if you're single. That night, you wear his oil for days. The first time you mirror someone like you are never lonelier. You hold your breath. Your face is red. Your family shifts. Never mind that when he leaves, you will clutch your belly. Walking into a plain cabin, he will not even look back. He will mount the steel and iron and sail across the sky. You will leave messages on his answering machine. Squeeze your lips tight whenever the phone rings. You will crave his mounting you. Somewhere is another of your kind. Crabo Creek binge one dem bari binakal girly. Hamni okay girly bulawe rahe kahe ki ka bole hum Antiman rahe. Even love one next man from 79 village jana bari bina sabi. Or sadi kare biba kare ki time aa gaye. The night before ilawa ite ko am bottle maltian and sab piye hai. Dawa, you know? Jaharia. What them pregnant gal the stick oni shame muman pa. Like when you get one pikmini belly or saram lagela, then you go pee the thing and then say, oh garo, hum apan my bap ke saran de del. Well, girly ke papa na bin no his son bin a drink jaharia, he carry him a hospital. When them abuja de lawa, girly ke boyfriend bin a come on one house and take him to the New Amsterdam side. Bad me, them bin a left mati and girly go back to your papa house for biba curry. E time okar my bap ke ओके जहरिया खिलावे रहे ताकि ऊ गर्ल के मारो तक ले जाए ऐसन करीस कि ऊ न भाग सके और लड़की से विवाह करे. Till now we married and he made Vietnam stay on Wisconsin side. In my village, there was once a man named Gurley. We called him that because he, acted like an Antiman. He was in love with a man from 79 village, and everybody knew. Come so, it was time for his marriage. The night before, he grabbed a bottle of Malthion and drank it. The rat poison that pregnant women drink when they have dishonored their families. Well, the father caught Gurley in time and took him to the local hospital. Later on, they continued with the wedding preparations, and the night before the wedding, Gurley's boyfriend scooped him up on his horse, and they rode away all the way to New Amsterdam. They eventually tired of each other. Gurley returned to the village to marry the Dolphin. This time, his parents drugged him. This time, his father dragged him to the mandap, where the priest started the havan and made sure that he didn't leave. He's married now, with 2 children, and lives in Wisconsin. Mohini is Vishnu's only female incarnation. When the gods churn the sea of milk and the nectar of life emerges, the demons, the asuras, steal it all. With quick fingers, Mohini picks it back from them. The master of tricks, she is the slayer of Bhasamasur. Once, when the demon who could turn others to ash with his hands mirrored Mohini's dance, he reduced his great form into nitrogenous dust. This is why there is immortality also. One look from her can drive one mad. Since Shiva saw her, Kama clove his heart in 2, the wild ache stokes a flame. Her eyes bellows. Knowing her to be Vishnu incarnate, Shiva trundles over the earth, an elephant in heat, stamping through rivers and forests. In his whirl of desire, he spills his semen across the land. Bewitched by Vishnu, on the earth, the bewilderer of demons, the thief of immortality, the man seduces Shiva. Ardhanarishvara is your household deity when you move into the Jackson Heights walk-up apartment with your boyfriend. A mantra plays the first time you see the flat, and it's your ringtone. It's your mother calling, Bhur-bhuva swaha. If there ever was a sign, it's this. He is a drag queen named Lotte. His catchphrase, karma's a bitch. Interstitial, his transitions bore into bedroom politics, cocaine dancing, and fucking with a wig on. Karma reduced you to ash. You open your blowhole and take him deep. Dolphins are prone to sexual experimentations. When he walks out, you call 4 guys you've known before. You disappear into the dark water, brackish, mixing scotch with salt water. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. So we are thrilled to have you both here and willing to have a little conversation with each other. So we will just kind of pass it back on to you to have a little chat.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Sayantani, is it okay if I ask the first question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I am really interested and excited to ask you about is the relationship for you between fiction and nonfiction, because this is your first book of fiction, is it not?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and which comes first for you, the fiction or the nonfiction?
So I came to study to get an MFA in fiction when I came to the US back in 2006. I had no idea there was anything called creative nonfiction. And the kind of nonfiction at that time that I was familiar with was typically biographies and autobiographies of dying, decrepit politicians on their deathbed. And those were not riveting in any which way. Or at times they were, travelogues or food memoirs and those sorts of things, cultural investigations. But I had no idea that I could just write about my life and that would amount to any kind of art that would mean something. I took my first creative nonfiction class with Professor Kim Barnes at the University of Idaho. And it changed my life completely, like right from the first day itself. And I fell in love with it so deeply that I switched tracks from fiction to nonfiction. And I just embraced nonfiction so thoroughly. And now I teach nonfiction. That's like my full-time job. But it's a field I have not known longer than 2006. I think in some fundamental ways, though, fiction comes first because I have always made up stories in my head. I made up stories to entertain my younger brother when he wouldn't eat, and my mother needed a quick fix so that he would be distracted enough and she could just plop food into his mouth. So I am constantly making stories about people who are sitting around me in cafes, in restaurants. I am never bored with myself in airports. If it's a delay of like 7 hours, I am okay. There are so many people to just watch and figure out what they are up to. So yeah, I think in some fundamental ways, fiction comes first. Maybe the more academic in me likes nonfiction more. So that's how I would differentiate between the two. But great question. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. I also have something to kind of like piggyback on this. Now that you've like published a book of fiction, like short stories, and you've published a collection of essays, Fire Girl, what have you noticed in terms of like the reception from readers about, in the difference or the similarities even?
Yeah, I think with Fire Girl, that book came out in 2016. And I was trying to write it for a global audience, that whoever is picking up this book is aware that multiple countries and multiple realities exist in the world. They will not be thrown off if I have something like garam masala in the text, and they will not need that kind of hand-holding where everything that is an Indian word needs to be italicized or needs to be explained in parentheses, but this is someone who will just look things up. And I was thinking a lot of the reader when I was writing Fire Girl. It was important to me that if the reader was not Indian, they did not feel left out of whatever conversation I was having on the page. And it was even more important to me that if the reader was Indian, they did not feel that I was over-explaining anything to a predominantly Western audience, because that often happens in fiction and nonfiction that I have read, written by South Asian authors who have maybe made a switch and they're living abroad. But a lot of the writing seems to be so catered towards the West that it's almost condescending to read about India when they have written it. I did not want that. But with Women Who Misbehave, this is the book I needed when I was 15 years old. I needed women to misbehave a lot around me because that's exactly what I was doing. And fortunately, I have parents who, caught me doing questionable things, but they were okay with it. And to an extent, they couldn't really punish because they had given me the freedom to read whatever I wanted, to consume any kind of literature I wanted. So if I was behaving according to what my heroines were doing on paper, it was totally their fault. That's how I explained it. And yet Indian cinema in the 1990s was very much a celebration of the good girl and the sacrificing girl. There is a great deal of, as you know from your familiarity with Hinduism, there is a great deal of emphasis on the theme of sacrifice. We really like women who sacrifice. And we really want women to sacrifice for their husbands and fathers and sons and younger brothers and so on and so forth. I have always thought that selfishness is a beautiful thing. I think you can be a wonderful person provided you start off by being a little bit selfish and taking care of yourself first. So this book honors selfishness, and not all of my women get happy endings, or it's not that none of them has to sacrifice anything, but this is a love letter to selfishness. And this is the book I needed. So I wasn't thinking of a reader at all. I was just thinking of myself when I wrote it, and it was a blast. So my official bio, as when Kate was introducing, says that I'm working on a memoir. sort of, kind of. I'm actually working on a literary ghost story / horror novel, because again, it's what I want to read. And that's exactly what I want to write now. So that's where my interests are at this point.
Wow, marvelous. I love what you're saying about the ghosts, or the selfishness, right? And how, even like any moment of self-care, feels as though it needs to go through that question of selfishness. Like, is this a selfish act? And, at the end of the day, when we see others, behaving in a way that prioritizes their own well-being, it enables us all to kind of enter into that space.
Right.
So, you're writing this book for yourself is actually a very generous act to all of the folks out there who feel kind of boxed in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I have a couple of questions for you. As you know, your memoir was one of my favorite reads last year. I probably said that to you in 900,000 emails that I sent you. And I wanted us to be in this event together because I'm such a fan of your work and such a fan of this book in particular. And there are several parts of the book where I have actually written in the margins things like, how dare you? What audacity? And it's it's come from a place of admiration and sort of just being incredulous that you would dare be this unafraid, as a gay man of Indian origin. What gives you the right to be so courageous? And I'm such a big fan of that stance. And all of the scenes with your father in particular are so heartbreaking and so illuminating. So my first question, Rajiv, is how dare you? Right.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this. Yeah, I wrote this memoir very much kind of, piecemeal. And it was through the editing process that I was like, okay, I need to illuminate a little bit more the relationships with the father and what the stakes are. And so I wrote it in the dark, not ever really expecting it to be anything or folks to be interested. And what it means to, in my family, to bear truth and to tell the truth. It's a really heavy situation. I'm not in contact with a lot of my extended family and even my father for that matter. And it's not necessarily because of what I've written, but it's how I've lived, and so it's taking that audacity and that boldness and then writing it on the page. I didn't realize, honestly, because nobody, let's just say poetry book sales are really, really small in comparison to you say a memoir. So I didn't really expect many people to have read this book. But it's funny because, how dare I indeed, the lessons that I've taken about living out loud and being bold have actually been from the women in my family who have done these courageous things. Like my grandmother, who migrated from Guyana to Toronto, was able to be herself in so many different ways, despite everyone around her wanting her to conform to what they thought she should assimilate to be, as well as my mom, who after 37 years of marriage and saying, we don't get divorced, got divorced and moved away to the beach and became a painter. It's these are the people around me that I saw living these lives, and it empowered me in a lot of ways to tell this story, the ways in which I've done in this book.
Marvelous. Thank you so much. And so inspiring. I wish that this is a book that's read by, everyone who feels marginalized, everyone who feels neglected, disrespected, because that's exactly how I felt when I was reading it, that, there are times I wish I had a book like this, because this is the message we need. So thank you so much for writing it. My second question is to do with the river Dolphins a little bit. And it reminded me of this writing exercise I did with a bunch of folks when you were sort of the instructor for Write Wilmington, which is an initiative of UNCW, wherein we have a guest instructor come in and conduct a Zoom workshop, so to speak. And I remember your prompt was so fantastic. You had us, I think, go to the New York Times' science section and pick up an article that we really enjoy or that we're intrigued by and write something in response to it. And I came across an article about poisonous snakes off the coast of Australia. And these snakes are typically something like 6 feet in length. And apparently if you are diving and if a 6 foot long, this particular poisonous snake decides to sort of come and hang out with you, as a diver, you are not supposed to get terrified and you're not supposed to sort of try and tell the snake, go away, I am of you. Because the snake is not trying to hurt you. The snake is probably merely just in the mood for some love. And I kept sort of unable to process how any diver would know what the snake is in the mood for. But the article begs the reader to think that you have to be considerate of the snake's erotic sentiments in the moment. So anyway, I had a blast writing in response to that article. I wanted to know if this was a writing practice that you emulate a lot, or is it sort of a natural instinct to pick up articles about animals doing their thing and how you can combine a personal story with that? How do you approach that?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And this goes back to my mentor, Kimiko Han, who at Queen's College, where I did my MFA, she teaches, and she has 2 books based on excerpted language from New York Times articles. The first one is called Toxic Flora. The second one is called Brain Fever. These are just fabulous books of poetry, and she's a marvelous teacher. And so I've taken her idea and I've extended it a little farther into thinking about like how to do this for myself as kind of like a jumping off point, using the language of others. It really frees your own mind. And it is a practice. Actually, in my first book, instead of using the New York Times, is it on my bookshelf? I don't think so. It might be at my bookshelf at school at Emerson College. Anyway, it was a field to upland bird taxidermy. At the time I was writing these poems, I was vegetarian, and nothing horrified me more than like a dead bird. Like, it was like, in my mind at the time, it was like the saddest thing. But then like pinning a bird in flight and having it be dead, but only the skin, it was like the weirdest and like the most disgusting thing that I could think. And I was like, I'm going to make poems out of these. And so like, I did that for the first book, and it became a thing. And then I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I mean, as a method goes, and I haven't been ever able to shake that. So every time like I see something, and especially about sea creatures, I'm like drawn to writing about them. And so the river dolphins came about very much in that way. But then also considering the fact that, you know, Indian diaspora, you know, my ancestors, some of my ancestors were from UP and Bihar, you know, close to the Ganga River, and there are dolphins in the Ganga River, and they were taken to a place in the world that also had river dolphins, which is the Amazon River Basin in Guyana. And I thought, whoa, this is totally like how, like, they could have been taken anywhere else and there wouldn't have been river dolphins, you know, which is pretty wild. To me. And I was like, okay, there's something here. Let me just see how I can follow it through. Well, apparently, according to legend and stories from the peoples from the Amazon River Basin, the Boto, or the pink river dolphin, the Amazon river dolphin, is pink, and is also a shapeshifter, and at night becomes a human and seduces people, and like either impregnates them, or gets pregnant and gives birth, or whoever gives birth will give birth to like another shapeshifter, Boto dolphin. And I was like, okay, this is just too good, because the Ganga river has the dolphins, and the goddess Ganga Ma rides the dolphin, or no, she rides the Karial, but whatever. I mean, the dolphin is associated with her as well, I think. And so I thought this was like divinity hiding in both of these creatures, and how queernesses can erupt. And so that is the particularities behind that story. But I also have another book of poems coming out in 2023 that really pushes the boundaries of the question that you ask about influence of science articles, and that's going to be about whales, and humpback whale song specifically. But I also, like, speaking of like being in various places, Sayantani. I wonder, how does writing change for you based on the place that you're in? I know that you've just come back from India at this as we record this, and I'm wondering, what's it like to write in India versus Idaho versus North Carolina, and how does that feel for you, and what changes?
Yeah, a lot. I think a lot changes. I think anyone who is bilingual or trilingual, we are different people in each of the languages we speak. And I think because English has always been the language of sort of professional endeavors, it's been the language I've spoken in college, whether in India or here, with professors, with bosses and colleagues. I think there is a side to me that comes out when I'm inhabiting a world in English. And when I'm speaking in Hindi, which is the national language of India, and it's the language with friends, it's a different persona. And when I'm speaking Bengali, which is my mother tongue, and I speak it with my parents and my family, then it's a different version of me. And I have become more and more aware of these three people the older I have gotten over the years. And I started learning all three of them at the same time when I was 5. And it was not a happy time because the grammar is so different for all three. Like English has the he and she gender. In Bengali, nobody has any gender. It's a genderless language. And in Hindi, everything has gender. So even your glasses will have gender, your mustache and beard will have gender. So it's too much gender in Hindi. So there were moments when I remember telling my mother that, can you just decide on one and I will follow that for all three languages. Don't confuse me, because it was so much. And I think more than the place, it's which language I have been speaking that leaves a mark, and that influences how I write. So I feel that I just came back from India, as you said, I cannot write immediately. I have to be here for a while. I have to get used to, oh my gosh, look at how many white people I have in my life. Because that's always like a startling, puzzled reaction when I land here, that do I know these people? Why are so many people, like, they don't look like me? Why are they nice to me, or what is going on? And similarly, when I go to India after a long time, if my dad has come to pick me up from the airport, I will say things like, can you imagine there are so many brown people in the world? And he's like, yes, we are those people. So it's, or when I overhear people speaking in Hindi in India, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at you, magical creature, forgetting that this is what they're supposed to be speaking to each other. It's not magical, it's life. So it takes a while for my brain to sort of readjust to where it is and what it can engage with. Is that the same for you as well?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I love the way that you've kind of like talked about like the worldviews that undergird the thinking, and as that goes into like communication. For me, English is my first language, as well as Guyanese Creole. And Creolese was not a language that we were ever allowed to write in or to like think in. It was a language that was for family to communicate and to tell jokes and stories. And Hindi in my family was always a language of song. It wasn't a language that was spoken functionally by anybody. Now, Bhojpuri, that was the language that was like the old language that they called broken Hindi. And in fact, like to think in it, to read in it, to write in it, to even learn the songs and the stories was considered backwards. So my grandparents' generation were the last generation that were functional in the language. And so I was lucky enough that I started learning Hindi when I was, early teenager. And at the time, as I was learning Hindi, I was learning to communicate with my grandmother in Bhojpuri. And so that's kind of how it happened. And I don't think that, my Hindi is not so great. It's not terrible, it's not wonderful. My Bhojpuri is even worse. But when it comes to like understanding songs, now that's something that like, since I've been doing that the most, that's what, lends its poetic sensibility and world to a lot of what I do, because I'm obsessive. I want to bring I want that kind of like oral heritage that I've inherited really to inform what I do poetically in this country, because we are at such a risk of having this. I mean, this language is functionally extinct. There are people who are trying to revitalize it in Trinidad right now. There's Dr. Visham Bhimul and people like Vinay Haricharan who are working to get Caribbean Hindustani up to a place where it can be spoken again, taught in schools. Suriname, right across the river from where my dad was from, it's still, the Suriname Hindustani is still spoken in a way that in maybe 2 generations past, where it died in Guyana or stopped being spoken in Guyana. So a lot of the work that I do is recovery. And so in the passage that I read, I mixed Creolese and my grandmother's Bhojpuri together to kind of reconstruct how she would tell that story of people who actually lived in Crabwood Creek in her village, So for me, when I speak in English and when I write in English, when I write in Creolese, when I write in Bhojpuri, I'm super conscious of who I'm excluding and who I'm including. And I feel like most of my contact with people who speak the Bhojpuri are people who are kind of like, in the spirit world, who are sitting at my shoulders, like literally. My auntie is here. She like presides over when I do these kinds of things. And like the Hindi that I know, my friends who speak Hindi, like there are people, I'm a different person for sure, but I'm speaking in Hindi to them. In English, I'm way more fluid and able to communicate and express myself. Yeah. And, that is also part of the worldview thing. It's like, I feel like a lot of my writing deals with how do I bear testament to standing at these crossroads of knowing so many different things. It's like, what is the next generation going to know? And when that comes to mythology and folklore, like you include in your own writing this mythology and folklore, and especially in Miss Josephine, like, the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel. I was wondering, for you, what role does that play in your daily life in order for it to get into your writing?
Yeah, I revisit fairy tales and folklore a lot. That's what I grew up reading as a kid. India is so rich when it comes to folklore and just our own fairy tales, stories from the various religious traditions. And as I mentioned before, my parents encouraged me to read pretty much everything from everywhere. And I was reading in these 3 languages, which was really helpful to sort of broaden my perspective. In my teaching also, I bring that a lot, because I think we lose something fundamental when we don't know the fairy tales that we come from. And those help us in understanding the fact that whatever reality we are part of right now, this is not just happening to us. This has happened to millions of people before us. I mean, that really is the point of reading, of course, and writing and any kind of art, to know that you are not alone, to know that this is not just happening to you. So I think that's very fundamental to me, to remind my students that, take off the pressure that you have to create something that's supremely original, because that's not going to happen. All the stories have been told, but what's not been told is your story, and how best you can tell your story is up to you, and how you can honor it. But because in MFA programs, there is so much pressure, I feel, on students that no, my story has to be like the one that changes all conversation. And that's such an unrealistic expectation, particularly from young people who are just starting out, perhaps. So I think that's another reason why fairy tales, folklore is such a good reminder that no, this has happened. Take a deep breath. This has happened. You just have to write your story, and that's all. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that's where my respect for these kinds of literature comes from.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Like mythology and folklore as archetypical or archetypes for thinking through story, etc., and how, what is original, and what is the originality that we have that can like completely radically electrify and change the discourse. That is so much, that pressure. Like I'm gonna have to write something so differently. And I vibe with that a lot.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Kate, how are we doing in terms of time?
I think we're just about ready to wrap up, unless you had one more question for each other? Otherwise, I think we're ready to go. How do you both feel?
I am, I'm just going to look at Rajiv for the next few minutes and figure out what he wants to say or do.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a question about point of view in Mrs. Josephine that you read. You wrote in the first person plural, and I was wondering. I love that move for what it does in terms of creating kind of like a shared community with the people and the girls that are considering Miss Josephine. And I'm wondering, the difference. Why not the first person perspective, and why not the third person removed kind of thing for this story? And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that decision, because I was interested and delighted by it.
That's how Miss Josephine showed up, because there are so many people who show up. But this sounds kind of, I think, alarming to anyone who's not a writer. But I remember trying to explain this to my husband when we first got together, and he's like, what do you mean people show up? Nerve-wracking, who shows up where? So, but people are constantly showing up in your head because you're letting them show up. And some people who don't leave, they become, the stories that you absolutely have to write. And Miss Josephine was someone like that. I feel that she just pulled up a chair and was like, nope, not leaving. You have to write me. And that's how she came, with sort of all these girls looking at her and trying to understand where she's come from and who she is. And I really felt drawn to that, because when you are like 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever, a young age, the need to be part of a community is so intense that, oh my gosh, I do not want my friends to think I am weird. I know I am, but I don't want my friends to know the extent to which I'm weird. I want my people. I want a tribe. I do not want to stick out. And I think that's very much a reality of young people anywhere in the world. So the fact that Miss Josephine sticks out in this neighborhood where otherwise things seem like there's a lot of conformity, all the mothers act together, all the girls act together, and there is very much this mob mentality. I think, again, anywhere in the world you go, there is, and this was something that really surprised me about the US when I came here, that there is so much talk of individualism and individual identity. And yet when I started teaching, all my students would show up for class dressed exactly alike, So I would have these little games in my head that, okay, I'm going to go and teach my freshman class, and I'm going to count the number of people who are wearing white shorts today. And it would be something like 27. So what does that say about individual identity if you are dressing exactly like your best friend? And that's not to judge anyone. It's just, it was an observation that for so much talk about individualism, it's like, no, we all have to dress alike. So I think that's how this happened. That's how the story showed up, and the people. And this sense of being watched and what you are watching, how you are processing things when you are about 12. So fascinating, and how a 12-year-old thinks and makes sense of the world. You're not a grown-up. You want to be one. You're looking at boys or girls, and it's complicated and exciting. So all of that good stuff. Are you writing any fiction? That's something I need to know.
Actually, yes, as a matter of fact. I have a draft of a novel. Whoa, it's weird to admit this in public, but I'm admitting this in public. I have a draft of a novel that I'm like sending out right now. It's called Snake Does Bite, and it actually incorporates a lot of mythology too. So, I mean, of course it would. So.
Oh, that's amazing. I think this gathering, we're obviously going to send all sorts of good vibes out in the world, and who knows, maybe we will hear good news soon.
Yeah, thank you.
How long is it right now? I'm always very interested in if there's a word count that you were aiming for, if you've already hit it, or you.
Yeah, it's the word count. So in the drafting phase, I was like, okay, I'm gonna aim for 70 or 65, because like it feels like 60 is like the small end, and it's better in my mind to have it be compact. I mean, I say that now, but that's not how it's going to be. But it's like about 84,000 words. So I mean,
That's a good size, yeah.
It's like a medium size. So I'm hoping that if somebody does want to take me on, they can be like, okay, well, how about this, change this, or add like 25,000 more words and just really go for genre fiction, or cut it back by 10,000 and have it be like more poetic. So
cool. Well, I know that I will definitely be keen to hear all updates on this front. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sayantani.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for being here. Thank you for the beautiful readings. It was wonderful to get to know you both a little bit better for that Q&A. I found it especially powerful to hear you both talk about the courage to, having the courage to be yourself and be selfish, and to write the books that you wanted to read. So thank you so much for that. And again, for being here with us today. Thank you also to Luke, GetLit's assistant coordinator, and our intern, Brittany, for helping out behind the scenes. To everyone watching at home, we are thrilled that you were able to meet Rajiv and Sayantani today in this virtual space. And if you're joining us from Spokane, you will have a chance to see both writers in person as well. Rajiv and Sayantani will be both teaching craft classes this week, so make sure to grab your tickets for those if you haven't yet. And please visit our website, getlitfestival.org, for our full schedule and more information about all of our events and authors, including today's talented writers. So thank you again for joining us today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.